Welcome to Tech Driven Business brought to you by Innovative Solution Partners. Carla Sarti, a seasoned executive, shares her insights that any team can use for leading successful IT projects. From understanding business processes to the importance of transparency, teamwork, and supplier relations, Carla reveals the key ingredients for project success. Welcome to Tech Driven Business, Carla. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Mustansir. Great to see you.
It's great to have you on our show, and I'm glad that you took the time out to share some of your thoughts and leadership with us today.
Absolutely.
So, our topic is going to be secrets to successful IT projects. How does it sound to you?
Amazing. It's one of my passions.
I know. And I think that's going to be something that will be very helpful to our listeners, especially in this day and age where technology is changing so fast. There are so many different options available,
Mhm.
and IT is in the middle of all of this. Let me start with this. I want to set the stage. So let's begin with this. Can you share some background on how did you find yourself leading IT projects when you started your career in a totally different arena?
Absolutely. So, yes, I have a business degree, I have my MBA. I started in audit and very specific businesses, purchasing, finance, etc. But technology was always something that I was very curious and passionate about. When I was a co-op at TRW, the vice president of finance came to me one day, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but we were on Lotus 123, and he had a disc in his hand, and he said, Carla, or little kid, or whatever he called me, here's a disk of Excel. I would like all of our reports moved from Lotus 123, put on Excel, and let's review them next week. And I said, okay, let's go. And so I taught myself Excel, and I really started to understand the power of technology. And that's just such a basic example, right? So
Hmm.
while I was still a co op, I got involved in an SAP implementation. And that really opened my eyes to what technology can bring. And I've been into it ever since. So, different functional groups I've been in, I've always brought best in class processes along with the technology side because I think it goes hand in hand. But I've done everything from SAP, Coupa, SharePoint, RPA, and now dabbling in AI.
Absolutely. When you doesn't matter where you start, even having a business degree, like you mentioned, technology is always with you and it's around you. So you got to either embrace it and you got to go with the flow, or you're going to fight it, right? So I like the approach that you mentioned that, your first array into this whole technology area was just, just the beginning of the iceberg, right? You got into this thing and now years later, you are very much ingrained in this whole technology stack. So let's talk about your experience. You have decades of experience. What do you see as some key factors that contribute to the success of IT projects, which is so important?
So I'm going to start with the assumption that before you implement any sort of technology, you've really understood your business, right? And where
Mhm.
are your business processes? What needs to be cleaned up? You're not just bringing in technology to bring in technology, because I don't think that's ever usually successful. But so you've done that. And then you've really understood, again, the current processes, the gaps that you have, and what is your success criteria. I think a lot of people, a lot of companies don't look at what success looks like at the very beginning. And they say, oh, okay, yeah, we're just going to implement this. We heard it's the best solution. And they don't think through, what are we trying to achieve? That that really starts dictating what a successful project looks like. Then you, through the whole project, you obviously have to have the right team members on the project, having an executive sponsor that can break down roadblocks. I've seen projects that the best ones typically have a business person leading them
Mhm.
because they understand what's trying to be accomplished. Not that IT can't lead projects, and they are definitely very integral to the process. But typically, when a business person runs them, they're implemented quicker, the understanding is there, the right process mapping has been done, etc. So you've got the right people. You probably have suppliers in the mix, because what company has all that skill set on hand? So you have to have the right suppliers. And then through the course of it, you have to have the right governance. So the communication process, the transparency of where the project truly is. Because as you know, IT projects are not 100% foolproof, right? Something always happens in any kind of project, whether you're building a house, you're baking a cake, whatever it is, something goes wrong. And you've got to have the right transparency and communication to understand what to do next. Then,
Absolutely.
obviously, you could have the best tool in the world, the best project, it's going great. You have to have change management methodology and processes embedded in the project. Because if people aren't going to use it, what does it matter, right? And I
Yeah.
mentioned Excel. When I was a co-op, a lot of people still use Excel, and you could put in the best shiny new toy technology and people are comfortable with Excel. So you've got to explain to people how their job's going to change and give them the appropriate training to make it a true success in the end.
For sure. And I think you touched upon some very key points. Starting with a champion, has to be a business. How do they currently do the job? How can they do it better? You know, Governance, such a key piece. You need to have that in place. Change management. I've been in technology field for so many years. That's one thing that we know. If there is no good change management in place, doesn't matter what technology, what kind of resources, or what kind of supplier you're using, it doesn't go well, because the
Mm-mm.
end user needs to be on board. They need to really be part of the whole implementation process in order for them to adapt and then be the voice of the new tool, because they are the ones who will be actually living with it, doing it on a daily basis. So
And
great
people get
point.
scared. I mean, they get really nervous when a new project's coming, right? And especially in the age of AI, people think they're going to lose their jobs, and companies need to do a really good job explaining, no, no, no. So you do this today, but tomorrow we need you to do that. And actually, you'll probably be more fulfilled doing the new. But it's just that way of explaining and coaching them through it, and not just dumping something on their lap.
Absolutely. I think, and that's the key, right? How is it helping the real users of the system, that this implementation or this piece of software, doesn't matter you're doing an ERP implementation, you're doing some kind of data analytics project, or any other systems that you're putting in place, it is there to help the business move to the next level. How can
Mhm.
be more profitable? How can we make it easier for our customers to deal with us? Different scenarios, right? And all of these are bundled together to give you the next level of the best, right? How can you do your job a better way than what you're currently doing? So
Exactly.
totally agree with you. Now, you touched upon one key fact, right? The idea of finding the right supplier. So, how do you find the right supplier to support your initiatives? Can you share examples of successful IT projects where your
Mhm.
supplier collaboration was very effective?
Finding the right supplier is key to the equation. I've always looked for a valued, trusted business partner. And there's a lot of ways to get there, and I think a lot of it is being upfront in the initial RFP process. And you've got to have as much information for the supplier as possible to bid on, because what you don't want is death by change order later, because they didn't understand the project, you didn't understand the project as the business. That breaks down a relationship really, really fast. So again, more of that transparency, the collaboration. Some of the best projects I've had, and I can't go into a lot of detail on them, but we implemented a tool in 18 months at one of my companies. And really, the success of the project was a lot on the supplier side. We brought somebody in with a great skill set in the tool that we were building. They had a roadmap, they had this amazing design methodology, and the right questions were asked, the right people were brought by us as the company, And, we got off to a great start. When things did go wrong, they were very, very transparent. They said, okay, we need to get together. Let's pull everyone together. Let's get these questions answered. And they didn't hide things. We didn't hide things. It was probably the best project I've ever implemented. And that's what it takes. Again, that collaboration, transparency, and that win win from both sides.
Absolutely. I think you touched upon all the things that a successful project should look like, especially from a practices point of view, the strategy point of view, and the relationship standpoint, right? All of these work together. And, you know, I just use the example of how many different projects that I've done. And, especially when you're working with clients, transparency upfront really helps. It sets the stage and makes sure that both the client and the supplier are on the same page. And when you start off with that approach, things, like you said, things can go wrong, but
Mhm.
you have a plan in place how to mitigate those issues. How do we get on the same page and make sure that whatever things that are an obstacle to the project are taken care of, working collaboratively versus, us versus them.
Right,
That's,
exactly. That's the last thing you want to get into in a project. It's already complex enough.
yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, right, there's always something that comes up. You have the best of the intentions, but it can be a business challenge, there can be a technology challenge, there can be integration challenges. All different factors play a role into things can go in a different direction very quickly. Uh,
Right. Or, oh, we didn't know this site had this approval process in here. And oh, this one has a different one. You find things as you get the project going, and you have to be agile. You have to be flexible. You can't have, the last thing you want is a supplier that's like, oh no, this is what we were brought in for. I mean, we can talk about commercials, but let's just all collaborate and get it done. That's where you need that trusted relationship, because you don't want the supplier thinking, oh, okay, they're going to ask me to do this for free. And you don't want the customer to be like, oh, okay, they're not going to be able to do it. So you've got to have that open dialogue.
for sure. So, on a personal note, how do you stay on top of this fast changing pace of technology? What's your secret sauce?
Well, I've always been a constant learner, always, right? I mean, and I think being a co op at 18 years old really drove that in me. It was the time, again, I'm gonna date myself. It was the time when computers were kind of just starting to be used. And I saw people just fumbling with the mouse. I mean, think of that in today's day and age, right? I mean, back then people were fumbling with mice. I was like, oh my goodness, I never want to be in a position where I'm not kind of at the forefront of technology. And I'm just a learner anyway. So, whether it be books, podcasts, really from a technology standpoint, I think is what keeps me up to date. I love the podcast. It's called All in One. It's for billionaires that actually have very different views on things, whether it be politics or technology or science, and they talk about everything under the sun. NVIDIA actually has an AI podcast. It's called the AI podcast. And then there's AI Today. And then being in GBS and shared services, a lot of my career, I stay on top of those things with SSO Next. And they talk about technology, tons of technology within that realm as well. I read tons of articles on like the Wall Street Journal, and then definitely leadership books. I know that's not necessarily technology, but when you're talking about leading people, again, through change and the best way to be collaborative, I find that to be extremely helpful. Patrick Lencioni is one of my favorite authors. The Five Dysfunctions of Team, one of my favorite books. And he writes very much like fiction, so it's really easy to get through. I don't know if you've ever listened to or read Jocko Willnick's books, but he has Extreme Ownership and a couple others. Phenomenal books, right? I mean, just kind of look at yourself in the mirror, and it goes to project management. So, extreme ownership, am I doing everything I possibly can to be successful, have my team be successful? So, really good one for project management, Mustansir.
Nice. I think you got a whole slew of resources available at your fingertips. That's good. I think like one thing that I really liked about your approach, I mean, you've seen it all, you play different roles, but it's refreshing to see someone like you in your space that you still find yourself as a student, still keep
Mhm.
on learning and be able to keep yourself ahead of the curve. And I think that's the key, right? The
Yeah.
different roles we play depending on what you're doing on your daily job, but at the same time, looking around and seeing what else is going around you.
Mhm.
Um, we live in the space of and the times of Gen AI being disruptive, and how it will change our lives. And it already is changing. How do you stay ahead, or at least keep up with the technology? I think is the key to your success. So that's what it seems like you've been very much in tune with it.
Absolutely. One of the coolest things I ever did was reverse mentoring. So I had someone younger in the organization mentoring me, right? And then it helps you get into their shoes and understand what drives the next generation. What tools and technology are they using? It's really fascinating. And of course, I use my kids too. I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, and just understanding how they think, what they're looking at, what they're using, what's Chat GPT-4 all about. You got to stay on top of things.
Yeah, I mean, and they are the best teachers. I mean, you think about technology. I mean, this younger generation is amazing on how they are adapting and all that. But let's get into the conversation about, we talked about successful supplier collaborations. Very
Mhm.
key, right? Important. Now, but what are some of the common challenges companies face with IT suppliers during a project? Can you share some ideas on thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the ones I've seen is where someone's oversold their capabilities, right? You've got a supplier, maybe they did a really good job on one project and they're asked to bid on another. And as a company, and again, trying to find that trusted supplier, it's very easy to fall into, well, let's just use these guys that were successful before. You've really got to evaluate, are they going to be successful for this project? And of course, they want business. Everyone wants business. But you've really got to look and say, okay, can I deliver on this project? Because if I can't, I'm actually going to ruin my reputation within the company. So just being honest and making sure, again, from the company's standpoint, you're choosing the right supplier and that the suppliers are again understanding the project that you're trying to implement. And maybe they don't understand at first and they think they can deliver on the project. So as a supplier, I would say make sure you ask the questions, be curious. Why are you doing this project? What exactly are you looking for? Oh, okay, it's in this space. Okay, we don't have people in that space. Well, I can maybe bring people in to do that. Really understanding that side to me can really change the dynamic there. And then again, I'm going to keep talking about the transparency. If the supplier cannot be transparent when there is an issue, it's not going to be good. I've always told people, whether they worked for me or a supplier, bad news doesn't get better with time. You've
No.
got to bring these things forward. We've got to come up with solutions together. I don't care whose fault it is.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, I want this project to be successful. So let's work together to get that done.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, and that's where my question to you is, how do you mitigate those issues? Everybody wants a smooth and successful implementation. It's just everybody thinks that's how it should go, but we all know there are challenges. So,
Mhm.
can you share maybe some ideas, thoughts on how do you mitigate those issues, or something that you may have seen in the past?
So we a lot of times use just basic project management fundamentals, right? You've got your project plan. Are you on plan or not? Then you look at what can go wrong. Okay. You list out all the things that you think could go wrong and you start putting mitigating plans together on that, right? And having meetings around those things. Okay, guys, how are we doing? Are we getting the data? That's going to be a big thing here. Did we get it? Did we not? What do we need to do? And again, having the right people on the project. So, do you have somebody who can go in, break down those roadblocks if things aren't getting done? building the right relationships. Again, you got to have the right people who can build relationships. Project management, as you know, is almost more about being a psychologist than anything else. I mean, you've got to bring people together that maybe don't normally work together. They have very different personalities. You've got people on the IT side that have different personalities than the project side. So you've got to make sure that you understand those factors and use project management methodology. It's there for a reason. I mean, I've seen people, they're like, oh, we don't need a project plan. I'm like, what? What are you talking? How do you do a successful project without a project plan? You don't even know what's coming next. You don't even know where you are in the cycle. Are you on track? Are you not? So I think those things, honestly, like don't overlook the fundamentals.
No, I think that's a great advice. One thing I like about your approach or your thinking is a project manager being a psychologist. How many times you go through these iterations of projects after projects. Being a supplier ourselves, I mean, I really appreciate your thought process on that because there's so many different stakeholders in any given time and project where you may have one stakeholder on board, but you may have someone else, either business, IT, whatever else you're working with. They may be either lost or they don't agree with your approach, or there's something else that in their space. And you need someone who can actually mitigate all those different pieces of
Mhm.
the puzzle and bring it all of them together in a way they see the value. It's all about value proposition and making sure that the end product is what the customer is asking for. Can we deliver? If we can deliver, what is the game plan? How do we go about making sure that we are all on the same page? Because at the end of the day, once it is delivered correctly, it's a win-win. So
Mhm.
I do appreciate that insight into it. And I know we talked about a lot of different things. I like to ask this one parting question. What is the one key takeaway you want to leave with our listeners today?
IT projects are very complex. So, again, I would say the fundamentals are key. Understand what you're trying to accomplish. That is number one. Understand the processes, get the right team involved, the right supplier, and set yourself up for success. So, fundamentals use project management methodology for sure. I mean, it's there for a reason, and have the right people on the project is key. I know I'm doing like 5 different key takeaways here, Mustansir, but really, again, it's just so complex, and the fundamentals, the right people, and the right methodology key.
No, thank you. Great advice and great takeaways. And I think once we have all these different pieces of the puzzle together, it's a recipe for success. So, with that, I'd like to conclude our session, and I'd like to thank you for coming on our show. It was a pleasure having you.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Tech Driven Business, brought to you by Innovative Solution Partners. Carla shared valuable insights that can be used immediately by your IT team. Her main takeaway: focus on the fundamentals that include understanding your objectives, involving the right team of staff and suppliers, and stick to solid project management methodologies. We would love to hear from you. Continue the conversation by connecting with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Learn more about Innovative Solution Partners and schedule a free consultation by visiting isolutionpartners.com. Never miss a podcast by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Information is in the show notes.